That's why I'm raw times two. Half-past despicable, last man to bring it through. Fast raps and critical stats, analytical slap. I'm hitting you smack. I'm sticking you smack lips to stack chips, all with the lyrical technique.
I'm going to start off with a quick announcement. By the way, welcome to the show. This is Breakup Gaming Society. I'm your host, the Great Unclean One. I talk about booze, board games, and hip-hop, but I have a quick announcement. We have a winner for the Board Games and Debauchery Story Contest. It's magnificent. It's going to be featured during Game of the Week in the next episode. It's about playing chess on LSD, and it's from one of my favorite board game writers. Stay tuned for that one. As far as this week, here's our 3 segments. Drink of the week. I'm finally sick of bourbon, so I went to a friendly local bar and tried my first Bulldog. Have you never had one? I scouted it out for you. I think I found my summer jam and maybe yours. Game of the week. I've now logged about 10 plays of Final Girl, the hit solo horror game from Van Ryder Games. My God, what a fascinating monster this is. I sponged the dried blood splatter off my walls, and I've got some impressions and recommendations to share. Track of the week. So with some apologies, we are going to get into some ignorant gunslinging shit from Mr. Hyde, Ill Bill, Gortex, and Necro. Here comes Drink of the Week.
I'm hitting you smack. I'm sticking you smack lips to stack chips, all with the lyrical technique.
So the birds are flying, and whiskey, the angry friend with whom I commiserated through the cold months, he's wearing out his welcome, so I head down to the corner bar at the marketplace on Commercial Street to try Bulldog. I've been curious about the Bulldog because A, it's the kind of thing that I would never assemble and make for myself, and B, summer is hitting and the switch is flipped where I'm in the mood for lighter mixed drinks and different flavors. So quick overview, a Bulldog is a margarita with a bottle of beer inserted upside down inside it. This novelty was fascinating to me. I traditionally scoff at margaritas. I've had them before and wasn't impressed. It seemed to me the whole concoction was just some sugary theatrics there to distract you from the fact that you couldn't afford a proper sipping tequila. I'm such a fucking snob. But when the nice gal behind the bar places the finished drink on the bar in front of me, my nose is wide open. I'm getting a big, salt-rimmed goblet with the usual foamy green contents, but there's a 7-ounce Modelo bottle held upside down into the drink, held there by the special clip they have. There's a corner table open next to the marketplace's floor-to-ceiling screens on the building's north side. It's golden hour, turning all Commercial Street's mining-era brick and stone into something out of a dream. All of a sudden, I don't need opportunity. I just need light and time. The drink is impossible to pick up by design. As I take my first sips through the straw, I get the usual salt and sweet of the margie. But as you sip, the beer starts emptying out into the bottom of the goblet. Flavor-wise, it's okay. Texture-wise, it's a delight. The margie starts to get currents of carbonation, delivering a different character and a delightful climbing buzz that tells you to relax. Summer's here, at last. Just to let you know how absorbing this experience was for me, I brought in my copy of Ghost Stories, which is a game where you have to defend a small Chinese village against invading demons. I've always wanted to learn the solo mode, so I brought it in thinking I was going to crack the rule book. I never even got the box open. I was in such a spell, I didn't care. So anyway, I will be back for one of these drinks. Thank you, Marketplace. Thank you, Corner Bar. Hit me up if you want to join. I'll bring down, if you're going to be in town, I'll bring down a copy of Splendor, and we'll knock these things down until we get 86th. Does that sound like a deal? Good. Next, here comes Game of the Week and some murder in an asylum.
I'm hitting you smack. I'm sticking you smack lips to stack chips, all with the lyrical technique.
So I've now logged 10 plus plays of Final Girl, Madness in the Dark from Van Ryder Games. If you watch board game media online, you know about it and you've probably played it already. It was a smash hit when it released in 2021, and it's still going strong with new movies featuring new Final Girl characters, new killers, and new locations. So for quick note here for our newbies. Final Girl is a solitaire horror game that lets you Step into the tennis shoes of a teen protagonist who is hip deep in one of horror cinema's biggest tropes. The terrified young girl who gets her shit together in the middle of a slaughter, makes a plan, finds some weapons, and fights back. Now, there's lots to do in this game, but the deciding condition is simple. You stop the killer or the killer stops you. Now, which killer? Depends on what horror franchise or classic you like. You can square off against just close enough not to get sued versions of the xenomorph from Aliens, the malicious entity from Poltergeist, Freddy, Jason, and lots of others. The newest one is based on 1982's The Thing, so there's no shortage of interesting places to die. So once you have the Final Girl core box for about $20, you can add movies for another $20 or so. Each one with its own VCR-style box, its own killer character, and its own map. And because each location and new killer are faithfully informed by what their movie versions did, each killer and map functions in an entirely different way. The monster aboard the space freighter based on Alien has 3 different growth stages with distinct stats and behavior for each stage. In the Maple Lane box, your final girl can only fight Dr. Fright, aka Freddy Krueger, when she's asleep. In the Poltergeist knockoff, you never face off against the antagonist at all. You've got to rush room to room getting clues that help you save the little girl and get the hell out of there. And once you own more than one movie, the game is designed so you can mix and match enemies and locations. Want to cut and paste the evil puppet master into a polar research station? Go for it. Fight an alien at a summer camp with the heroine from a folktale? That's on the menu. Want to play cat and mouse with mutants in a mid-tier sit-down restaurant? Just go to anywhere that's serving at 1 p.m. Sunday in the North Powers corridor of Colorado Springs. That expansion's free. You drew the 11% tip for a 10-top event. You're dead, Final Girl. But mix and match challenges are still in the middle horizon for me. Right now, my hands are plentiful with the Madness in the Dark module I chose, which gets its inspiration from the Silent Hill console video game franchise and its Asylum cum Abattoir setting. So what follows is a number of observations in 2 major buckets. My first few runs at the game, when I was still getting my head around how to run it and seeing how theme meshes with gameplay, and bucket 2, which reveals the thrill and disgust I experienced when I started realizing what it would take to effectively move this creation's many blood-soaked levers. Lastly, I'll leave you with some parting thoughts and a few recommendations. So, Chapter 1, the first few tries. First thing that hits me is this game is busy and it is slick. I was frankly astonished to see how much game popped out of these magnetic VCR-style game cases. Piles of little cards, meeples, location-specific items, and tokens that go with scenario-specific rules. First impressions? It felt like seeing recombinant genius, like when the Strokes broke in 2001. Mechanically, there's nothing wholly new here, but it's combined seamlessly and with great verve. This game just feels crazy smart right off the blocks. 2 things seem to reside comfortably side by side here. A tale of plucky empowerment starring you, the final girl, and the Tom and Jerry splatter mandate of the parent materials tropes. I laughed out loud when I was setting up for the first time and I found I had use of a hospital gurney. Now, if you want to use it as a mission of mercy, it can help you get extra helpless victims to the exit. But if you're in a pinch, you can use the gurney as a weapon and hurl it at the ratchet lady, who's the killer, with all the victims on it to do extra damage. But the only downside is the victims die. You decide. Other great touches. The pills and tablets. There are pills laying about in various rooms that you can snatch and gobble up. There's a pill effects card that shows what happens when you save up your pills and start munching combos. There's an item called a patient gown that you can get in one of the searchable locations. It has flavor text that says, "I hate myself. I haven't taken a single move yet, and I already feel like I'm getting my money's worth." And I also want to talk about, the pleasure point of where theme, mechanics, and emotional response from the player, all line up so well here. These gears all mesh early. as I set out with Veronica, who is one of the two final girls that come with the Madness in the Dark box. Now, when I hit the first trigger, which is a horror card that you have to draw at the end of most turns, Nurse Ratched promptly lurched into her room and iked a victim. I placed the first ever yellow victim meeple in the dead space on my player board. There was a tightness in my throat. I already hated the Ratchet Lady. In subsequent turns, I find myself leaning over the victim meeples during the panic phase rolls and just yelling, "Run, motherfucker, run!" Associative emotions come intense and early here. During my first few games, I never threw one blow in anger or even wielded one item, before things collapsed on me. The realities of the management card action system set in on me too late. Let's talk about how you get things done here. Anything you do, from walking to pausing for a deep breath to attacking somebody with a bone saw that you found in a closet, that all requires horror check rolls. Miss your rolls? You can mitigate bad luck by burning unused action cards, but you'll soon see during the planning phase, when you buy new actions for the next part of your strategy, how screwed you are if you burnt your whole hand trying to get 2 errand-level actions done and you don't have the resources to do much more than shiver under a desk during your next turn while everything goes to hell. It's an interesting action management system that requires a lot of thinking, and it's pretty unforgiving. This is the only solo game I've played a lot outside of Space Hulk Death Angel that produces so much blood and disastrous losses so early. It has horror movie flavor, but I was mistaken thinking that this would play by a horror movie arc. Maybe a few introductory killings, some unveiling or minor scrapes while the tension builds and I gird myself for a showdown. This assumption got me killed a lot. After 2 failures, I was finally coming around to the idea that I had to mix offense and combat into my action planning from the very first turn. I was getting butchered in second plot beat events right after the opening credits. I'm also was getting some pretty major rules wrong, but that's why we get reps in. I started to feel as if I was punching more controls on the dashboard instead of being buffeted along on a tide of bloody surprises. The dashboard of the game's many indicators was starting to feel like something I could use to affect an outcome instead of just being part of a symphony of fail. I started to last longer and be able to do more stuff, finding myself in use cases on the Asylum map where wrinkles in triggering, effects, and tracking made the game look a lot fussier than it did on its first 2 plays. For the first time, I figured out how to rescue victims. I even slowed down once enough to commit a search action and find a knife in a supply closet. I used the Asylum-specific Calm action to transform 2 of the Ratchet Lady's maniac minions back into trembling and quasi-compliant mental patients. I saw how the come back from the dead twists work. Although the pacing of these plays sagged a lot at the end, I was alive and had some things I could achieve on some of these games, but the Ratchet Lady's lack of an upper health limit made her all but invulnerable as the Bloodlust track boosted her movement and health. There's lots of times I just folded up the game rather than grind out another couple turns of fruitless cat and mouse. So be warned, there is an investment involved in learning how to pilot your final girl. There's a deceptive amount of weight and detail hiding in those tidy VCR boxes. Now, thematically, you get ROI right up front, but there's a bill due unless you want to continue being a smear and a shock of hair on a grimy tile wall. While it's not as sprawling, I can't help but be reminded of another old game on my shelf, Arkham Horror. I think Final Girl does theme better than Arkham Horror. The source material's ethos in Final Girl feels fused into the gameplay at a molecular level. The action, sprawl, and general unkindness of Arkham Horror 2nd Edition was its theme. The snippets of disembodied Lovecraftian flavor text at the location counters, they never really stuck. They offered horror, but it was really just a pulp adventure when it was in motion. Final Girl feels more integrated that way. So, I finally come to grips with the fact that while there are movie themes and beats, they're hitting your sensorium with stressors akin to watching several horror movies at once. Like Arkham Horror, there are 3 or 4 very major things that are going wrong all at once, and unspeakable enemies gather against largely outmatched characters. But in Arkham Horror, the inexorable gears don't advance at such overwhelming speed. You get ground into a fine pace slowly. Final Girl goes from 0 to fucked in 3-point-you're-dead seconds. And like I said, a lot of my learning sessions in Final Girl, they sagged nastily after turn 4 or 5. I'd still be on the map with ostensible options, but by that point, the Ratchet Lady, my antagonist, was out of control. I had a couple bad die rolls that cost me turns I couldn't afford to lose, and I didn't want to just limp around the board. Back in episode 63, I reveled in the fact that the Morkborg RPG is called Frontier Scum, presented you with the plain proposition of dying hilariously in the strangest way possible in an awful place. You accept that to tell the story. Final Girl dangles a heroic story in front of you, but the product is dying hilariously in the strangest way possible in an awful place, at least in my first series of games. And like I said, there's not really necessarily a story first. It's a glitter bomb of viscera playing at 8x speed with not enough ways to remediate the hard knocks, it seems. By the third or fourth play, the comedy of misfortune instead started to produce disgust. It's the second turn. I just want to move 2 spaces away. I cleaned out my hand with bad rolls, and I'm about to lose my third turn because the horror track is already out of control. All of a sudden, none of it felt fun or funny anymore. But I stuck with it and I learned some things. Chapter 2, games 5 through 10. So by this stretch of games, after rebalancing my focus and refining my approach, this game's relentlessness, cruel comedy, I'm starting to deal with how the pressure comes from all directions at once. I follow Giant Brain Chris Farrell on Instagram, where he reviews tons of board games. I remember now what he was saying on Instagram about his experiences with this game. He said, I feel like the game is playing me. And that's one of the reasons. He said he was putting it down after a few plays. And I get it. A day before seeing his post, I noted that even for the usual pressure cooker of a tough game with a grisly theme, I had never felt so pushed into a reactive mindset so forcefully. My 5th or 6th game was case in point. I couldn't get anywhere. Dice rolls plus bad events meant something I needed to do in 2 turns took 4. I was already screwed. By the 5th turn, the Ratchet Lady has a terrible head of steam. I got one clever move off and then I died. Even when I was, when I was able to balance my options, hopelessness started setting in early and often. A few bad rolls can derail you very badly and leave you rudderless, and the game's wild challenge machinery just speeds out of reach too quickly. But then, and this goes back to the way Final Girl's theme, mechanics, and strategy blend so well, I did something that movie watchers want every heroine to do. I snapped. Things started to go wrong early, again. So I made a beeline for a bone hammer sitting in a utility closet and spent every turn I could smashing it into Ratchet Lady's face, bleeding from deep cuts myself, banking all my plays on retaliatory and big strike abilities. As I forgot my usual self and, in the space beyond sense or even courage, flew at her with everything I had left, and I learned a lot about what the game wants me to do. She came back to life and killed me, as it happens in the movies. Oh well. Her endgame superpower eventually activated, and she started spawning waves of maniacs from her location, issuing toward me in a gibbering stream down a hall. Veronica was already exhausted. She had 2 victims with her, and she knew they weren't going to live long enough to see that exit sign. You could practically hear the sticky bone hammer fall with a lonely clank as Veronica realized that she was out of gas. But it was a good story, and a bright guidepost to reorient my approach to the game. Just apologies to Veronica and the nameless ranks of victims who suffered needlessly because I'm a slow learner. So a couple of observations to leave you with. While it's amazing to see how many distinct functions and pieces and flavor comes out of these magnetically bound boxes, I will say this is a lot of setup for a single playthrough. In my house, this only gets taken out for multiple plays. The first time I saw How the world inside these boxes laid out and got organized, I was amazed. The third play, it all started to feel too clever by half. Sometimes it feels like a pretty toy that's too much work to put back in its carrying case. That's a lot of packing, shuffling, and repacking. Which direction is this magnetic spine supposed to face again, and why isn't it flush? That's a lot of work for one go-around, but the nice part is I suck at the game, so when I take it out once, it'll be there for an evening and an afternoon. As far as recommendations go, if you love the milieu, its tropes, have an appetite for punishment, and crave all the distinct flavors of punishment that'll come with each killer, you should get this. But I would not recommend this to anybody who doesn't have a pretty rich frame of reference for what unforgiving solo games are supposed to do. I pity the noob who sees this on a shelf, thinks, I love horror movies, and marches to the register with their debit card out. There's a wild level of detail and unmerciful challenge in those cute boxes. Concentrated variety and misfortune that will expand very quickly. Contents under pressure. Be advised. As for me, I've made friends with the game's proposition. This is going to see a lot of table time this summer. It's beckoning to me with the same force as Thunderbolt Apache Leader did over late winter. I love Thunderbolt Apache Leader, so something is working here. And if I earn my stripes and get proficient at taking the Ratchet Lady down, I'm thinking I might get the Intruders movie, which is based on the multiple psycho home invasion premise, or Thanksgiving, as it is known in the upper Midwest. Here comes Track of the Week.
I'm hitting you smack, smack. I'm sticking you smack lips to stack chips, all with the lyrical technique.
So at first, on my sticky notes where I planned these segments out, I had a more artistic track in mind for you, but quick whirlwind romance with the Bulldog cocktail took me in a different direction. This song found me after I got home from my Bulldog to discover, oh, you clever man, that I still had a few fingers of Milagro Reposado left on the counter. So I sat in the dark in the addition of my house on a folding chair, looking out at the night, the speakers pointing at me from the mud room, and I listened to Ill Bill, Mr. Hyde, Necro, and Gortex, who are the royalty of late 90s, early 2000s, ill white boy dirtbag underground, turn their ids loose in what feels like the only place they really belong, the Wild West.
When I step foot in the saloon, I get a lot of attention. I reckon these haters are threatened by the strength of my weapon, the speed of my bullets. Y'all wanna taste the heat of my bullet. I'm a goon with the golden 6-shooter and a mullet. 4 dead, jump up on top of the bar and shout. If anybody else want drama, then pop it off now. How many times
it feels like this should have been the meathead anthem that Kid Rock's execrable I'm a Cowboy turned out to be. Kid Rock couldn't write a bar for shit. He's been garbage ever since he was on the Jive label, and eventually got over with his work ethic and his correct calculation that arenas full of white kids were ready to buy if he bolted some guitars onto his shitty screamed rhymes and his underfed trailer park pimp with fetal alcohol poisoning vibe. But his turgid bullshit rap rock was never animated by an ounce of talent. These guys are targeting the same chakra that sloshes with jizz, Monster Energy drink, and antisocial power fantasies, except these cats could actually rhyme. Here's Necro lighting it up on his verse.
My aiming is more than precise. When I slay men, we both got gas. Let's play for blood, just say when. Let's settle this so we're crystal clear on who's the nicest and the fastest ever. I'm the deadliest pistolier. There's no future for dumb fucks after my gun box smooth when I'm maneuvering my 6-shooter like nunchucks. Shooting clowns in the faces, then drinks are on me. Piano Man, Stephen Foster, Camptown races.
The track's full of fun homage. A badly sung chorus that lifts the entirety of Metallica's Four Horsemen lyrics from their very first album. Generous sprinkles of Tombstone and 60s, 70s Western references. It's the best thing you could turn these scrappers' gifts to. A dusty, technicolor crime wave with no laws outside the dictates of what makes a good scheme.
Wild bunch horsemen, the fugitive outlaw. With double barrel action, son, I'll shoot at you southpaw. Young guns with toast out, always the most foul. Riding through your streets, turn your hood to a ghost town.
The horsemen are drawing nearer. On a leather steeds we ride. We've come to take your life.
Well, smoke from the shootouts was cleared, and the spell of this song was broken in the morning. I turned to my other listening. The teenager inside me was placated, and I had a headache anyway. This definitely not the song you put on just for relaxation. It seems ideally played in that over-in-a-flash moment of abandon somewhere between the fourth shot, the third bump, but before the cops come because your SO tore a clump of someone's scalp out. But right up until then, a vile and electrifying comic book ride. Perfect for the part of you that loves braggadocio and gun checks, minus any of the usual danger that making gun checks with people's names invokes in real life. P.S. Some of the rhymes on here are simply vile. You've been warned, if you ever listen to the whole track. That's the show. I am the great unclean one, thanking you for spending this time with me. If you dig what I'm doing here, head to breakupgamingsociety.com's donate page and hit me up with a tenner. I will send you a copy of Chaotic Shots and Cocktails That Will Hurt Your Friends. And also, I hope to see you next time out where we're going to read the winning entry from the Board Games and Debauchery contest. Until then, memorize places in your house where you can fashion improvised weapons, watch for the obvious plot points, and may you fight long and well.
Keep your hands off my stuff, you weirdo. You've got a hands like a fucking hobbit, you freak. You don't look well, mate.